Hello everyone, my name is Leslie Rodriguez. I am the Assistant Director of Financial Aid, Athletics and Compliance, as mentioned by Haley, thank you. Today we're going to be talking about how to fund an education here at George Mason. So some of this information might be new to you, it might be something you've heard, but we all hope that you learned a little something extra today. And of course, we will have information regarding contact for our office at the end of this presentation. So the Office of Student Financial Aid, what does OSFA do? So we assist you and your family by providing the information on ways to pay for your education. We provide students with a couple of different things that are in different timelines. And so the first thing is the aid and application and program information, so forms and deadlines, because some people have questions on what forms they need to fill out and when they need to fill it out. Financial aid awards, once that is done, you get something and you might ask yourself, well, how am I supposed to read this? What do these numbers mean? It could be a little daunting, so we're here to help you understand that. Financial aid counseling. Once you accept your financial aid, what are the next steps? What are requirements to get loans, grants, and scholarships? Is there anything extra you need to do? That's where we're here to help you understand that. And then finally, we can provide additional resources that is outside of our office. So things like private loans, things like outside scholarships, we can kind of help you navigate through all of that information. So down here, you'll see that we have the biggest two applications that are going to be done by students, FAFSA and the VESA, and they are separate, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So each year, students need to apply for one application. They cannot do both, they need to do one, otherwise there might be an issue with your information in the system. The first, which is the most popular, is the federal application for federal student aid, which is the FAFSA. So you would complete that at the government website, which is not through Mason. There are different updates that occur for the FAFSA throughout the year. So we do tell students to go look at any kind of announcements that federal student aid has put out, just so that you're aware. And we also want people to know who is eligible. So you can be a U.S. citizen or something called an eligible non-citizen. And it is important to understand if you meet the criteria, because that can open up this application for you. So we encourage students, when they're in this application process and they believe they're in the FAFSA eligibility group, to look at these sites. Now, if you find that you are not eligible for the FAFSA and you are a Virginia undergraduate student, so not an out-of-state student and not a graduate student, there is another application called the Virginia Alternative State Aid Application, which is the VESA. And so that is handled by the state. It is not a Mason application. So again, outside of Mason, but we get the information from the state. And so generally, if you're not eligible to complete the FAFSA application, you can complete the VESA. They have their own definitions of what is considered a Virginia student. That is not something that Mason itself determines. So we always encourage students to understand whether or not they are a Virginia student in the definition to meet the eligibility requirements for VESA. And so you can see that on the state's website. Now, the priority deadline for the 25-26 aid year is March 1st. However, the FAFSA stays open if you're eligible for that. So this is the VESA for the duration of the academic year. So even if you haven't applied by March 1st, you can still apply for right now 2024, 2025 up until the end of spring. And also you can apply for the 25-26, even though the March 1st priority deadline has passed, and that's generally speaking for limited state and institutional funding. However, you can still apply and we will award anything that's eligible when we receive that. We have a Mason school code, so that's just there for reference. Financial aid award information. So students sometimes have a question about what the cost of attendance is, okay? The most important thing to understand is that the cost of attendance, known as the COA, is not your bill. This is separate from your bill because this is an estimated annual budget of average costs. And so you can see things on this cost of attendance that include billable items, such as tuition and fees, because you are registering for classes, and living expenses if you live on campus, but also non-billable items, the things that you will need as a student, such as books and supplies, transportation expenses, and personal expenses. Now, if you are not living on campus, you will still see a living expense because everybody has to have somewhere to live in the meantime as a student. And so we put that there as a budgetary item, but that is not mean you are being billed. To see the financial aid award, you would go into Patriot Web on the financial information tab, versus if you're trying to look for your student account, which is the billing side, you would go into student services. So understand that those are two different things, and that is not your bill. we receive that. So you want to look at those numbers a little different depending on your situation. You will also see something that says SAI, or Student Aid Index. And that number is determined by the information that you and your parents, if eligible, put on the FAFSA. So if you put information regarding your income, your assets, all of that gets calculated in a formula that is outside of Mason. We do not calculate that formula. We're given that formula, and that is the information that we use in order to see what you are eligible for in regards to any types of loans and grants. That is not the number, like a dollar amount of aid that you are eligible for, or what you are expected to provide to the school as a payment. And you can always see how the SAI is calculated. It is open information, and so if you are curious how that was done for your particular FAFSA, you can look at that with the federal government. There are different types of financial aid awards. There is gift aid, which is aid that does not need to be paid back. And so we have grants, which are need-based aid, and you have to file one of the forms, a FAFSA or a VESA. You have to have that completed. For scholarships, which are generally merit-based, and you can receive them at different times in your academic career, you may or may not have to file a FAFSA or a VESA. It is depending on the scholarship, so you can always inquire, but we generally say, just file one or the other if you're eligible. There is self-help aid, which is aid that needs to be paid back, and so you might have heard some of these. There are federal student loans, there's federal Parent Plus loan, and there's also private loans. Now, with federal student loans, it is important to understand that there are two separate kinds of loans. One is a subsidized loan, the other is an unsubsidized loan. And so we encourage you to go to the federal website if you are thinking about taking these loans or exploring the option to understand what the interest rates are, and those are set by Congress, not by the schools, and also understand what the repayment of both loans would be, how interest accrues on either loan, and how you can use each one as a financial tool while trying to fund your education. The Parent Plus loan, that has an additional credit check application with the federal student aid. You have to complete the FAFSA before you complete the Parent Plus loan application. And it is a completely separate loan from that of the student. It will be in the parent's name, and they also have different interest rates and also different repayments than federal student loans. But if you are interested in exploring that option again, you would have to go to the federal website to get the most up-to-date information. And finally, with private loans are outside organizations such as banks or educational lenders. And Mason does not recommend any private lender. However, we do have on our website a way for students to understand which private lender is suitable for their needs. So for example, if you are an international student, you would select that you're an international student, and it would show you the types of different organizations, banks, and educational lenders that work with international students in order to get educational loans. We also have contact information for those organizations, and we also have a range of the interest rate. However, everything is subject to that private lender. Mason does not have any part in certifying that approval for the loan. We just certify that when it comes to say, what your cost of attendance would be, and also your student year. And then finally, some students that apply for FAFSA may see what's called federal work study. And that is a federal student aid program that provides part-time employment while you are in school to help pay for educational expenses. It is not a job that you can work however much you want. There are limitations to this kind of employment. It also, you have to look for the job and apply for the job. We do not place you in any kind of job. And also your income is earned, and it does not get applied to your student account. It is a paycheck. So that is different from the other types of aid that do get applied to your student account in order to pay directly to your educational expenses, okay? And so those three types are generally what you will see. Other things you may see on your financial aid award, maybe an outside scholarship, if you receive that, that usually is just listed as an outside scholarship, and those are scholarships that students look for externally outside of the school in order to get help for your educational expenses, and that gets sent to us. If that is the situation that you find yourself in, you would have to go to our scholarships website to make sure that you are following the directions on how to send us those funds. They need to get reported a certain way, so if you have an outside scholarship, you want to make sure that you're following the guidelines there. Other considerations, sometimes people that have a FAFSA get selected for something called verification. And that is just a process that is used to confirm the data reported on the FAFSA. This does not indicate that you did anything wrong. It is a random selection from the government to say that we need to look at information, and so therefore we have to request documentation. So when we request it, we do it via email, and we will do it through a secured site called Patriot Forms, in which you are able to upload your information, but you can also drop off in person or fax it to us in order to keep it secure. We do not want anything via unsecure email, but that can take a little longer in the process, and we notify you once that is done and if there's any change to your award due to the verification process. There are also special circumstances that if you or your family have experienced any changes to your financial situation, such as loss of employment, there are situations in which we can make what's called a professional judgment. So if you think that you have a special circumstance that's extenuating, so something that is out of your control, like a job loss, or some other unfortunate situation, please email our office so we can provide you with what options are available depending on your situation. We ask that you contact us early on so that we can make the changes before any aid needs to be dispersed. And finally, there is something called the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, which we normally call FERPA, and that is just a federal law that protects the privacy of student education records, and which includes financial aid information. So if you have a third party that is interested in understanding your student account bill, your financial aid, you would need to give them FERPA authorization, which you can do online, in order for our offices to respond to emails and phone calls. If we do not see that there is a FERPA authorization, we are not allowed to discuss anything regarding your account, and that can cause an issue if you are having an outside party, such as a parent, pay for your student account and they want the information regarding that. So finally, this is the separate office that we work with, and that sometimes can sound like it's what our office does, but it's separate. So what do the student accounts office do that's different from the financial aid office is that they are the ones that bill actually. So previously when we discussed that the financial aid office sends you a cost of attendance that is an estimated budget, the student accounts office actually sends you your bill for your actual charges. And so there is where you will be able to see what you owe the school each semester. They also take care of things like third-party billing, which can include a 529 plan, any employer tuition reimbursement, and especially your veteran affairs benefits. So if you are a student that also will receive a GI Bill in conjunction with financial aid, understand that the financial aid part is handled by our office, but the benefit part is handled by the student accounts office, and they might also have different timelines, different deadlines. So you want to make sure you're communicating not just with our office, but also their office for anything that you might have to submit in order to get those kinds of benefits. They also do payment plans each semester. That is not through our office. So if you're thinking, well, okay, I can finance some of my education with financial aid, but I have to pay the rest out of pocket, you would want to go to the student accounts office in order to get that payment plan set up. It is online only, and you sign up online through their TouchNet portal. They also process any refunds based off the charges and aid received. So if you have an excess of aid that is greater than your charges, you can receive that funding to you directly. Direct deposit is highly encouraged. You sign up again online for Patriot Web, but they're the office that process those refunds. So if you're expecting a refund from financial aid, but you haven't received it or you don't know where it went, then you would contact the student accounts office as they would be able to help you with that information. They also handle international payments, which are done through Flywire or TransferMate, which are the two options that international students can utilize. If there's any questions about that, you would contact the student accounts office. Email is their primary means of communication, just like it is for our office. We always ask that you email often, you email soon, and that you're just asking the questions you need to ask in order for us to be able to assist you in a timely manner. Which brings us to our last slide here, and this is our contact information. So you can see our hours. We have walk-ins where you can actually sit with a counselor, depending on your situation. You can explain, and they can help you in the moment, but if something else, you might want to make an appointment to have more dedicated time. Again, we always ask that you email just so that you have a record also what question you sent and what was answered. You can also call though, and you can also fax information. We have our website, where we have a lot of information that's there, and you basically can go and see, again, the information we talked about, what types of grants there are, what types of scholarships there are, what types of loans, what types of better work study, and private loan information. So I hope that that was informational for you, and that if you have any questions, you will certainly reach out to us.